Every empire calls itself civilized, until it starts collapsing in slow motion. The United Kingdom, one of the richest countries in the world, is now a place where doctors rely on food banks, families can't afford rent, and young people have quietly begun to leave. How did a nation once seen as a global success story become a place people no longer want to live? Because the truth is, what's happening in Britain isn't a temporary crisis. It's the result of a system designed to look prosperous on the surface, while quietly draining the life beneath it. Cities aren't built for people anymore. They're built for systems. Systems that need you to keep moving, but never arrive. This is the World Historian. We reveal the hidden forces and secret networks shaping the world you think you know. Nothing is as it seems. To understand why life in the UK feels like it's getting harder, we have to go back. Decades before the cost of living crisis, before Brexit, before COVID. It began after the Second World War. Britain had been bombed, broken, and humiliated, but it rebuilt with purpose. The government invested in people, new homes, new jobs, and the NHS, a promise that health and dignity would never again depend on wealth. For a while, it worked. Through the 1950s and 60s, wages rose faster than inflation. Social mobility was real. A factory worker's son could go to university, buy a home, raise a family. But the cracks appeared in the 1970s. Inflation, unemployment, industrial unrest. Factories closed. Energy prices soared. Britain faced a choice: rebuild its industries or reinvent its system. Then came the 1980s. Margaret Thatcher's revolution, privatization, deregulation, and the sale of public assets. It began with right to buy. Millions of families bought their council homes, proud of their ownership. But those homes were never replaced. The social housing stock collapsed from over 6 million in 1980 to just over 2 million today. Today, the waiting list for affordable housing in England alone is over 1.2 million families. At the same time, Britain's industrial towns, once global powerhouses, were gutted. Sheffield, Newcastle, Manchester, their factories and mines shut down one by one. By the mid-1990s, manufacturing had halved as a share of the economy. Communities built on steel and coal were left with nothing to build anymore. The financial sector filled the vacuum. The City of London became the new heart of Britain's wealth, not by producing goods, but by trading assets. Money began to make more money than work ever could. And when speculation replaces production, everything changes. Homes become investments. Education becomes debt. Public services become cost centers. And ordinary people are told to compete in a game that's already rigged. The UK had reinvented itself, from a nation of builders to a nation of brokers. It looked modern. It looked global. But beneath the surface, the foundation of shared prosperity had quietly cracked. Fast forward to today. What we're seeing isn't a string of isolated problems. It's the same design reaching its logical end. Wages have been flat since 2008. Real pay today is barely higher than it was 15 years ago. The average house price is now 9 times the average salary, one of the worst ratios in Europe. In London, it's closer to 12 times. Meanwhile, rent consumes half of a young person's income. A one-bedroom flat in Manchester can cost £1,200 a month, more than the take-home pay of someone earning the national median wage. You hear stories everywhere. A teacher in London earning £38,000 a year, yet forced to share a flat with strangers because rent takes up most of her pay. A nurse in Manchester finishing a night shift, queuing at a food bank before heading home. A young couple saving for a deposit, only to find house prices rising faster than their salaries every month. These aren't isolated stories. They're the new normal. And when a generation can't afford stability, it doesn't just affect the economy. It reshapes the soul of a country. Even professionals aren't safe. Junior doctors, nurses, teachers, once stable, respected careers, now report struggling to afford the basics. Food banks have doubled since 2019. The NHS, once the pride of Britain, is collapsing under record demand. In 2024, More than 7.7 million people were waiting for treatment. Ambulance delays, GP shortages, underpaid nurses, the entire system stretched past its limits. Hospitals now rely on overseas staff to fill critical roles. Nearly 1 in 5 NHS doctors were trained abroad. Yet even they are leaving, worn down by low pay and endless shifts. GP appointments can take 3 weeks to secure. Ambulances wait outside A&E for hours, sometimes overnight. Meanwhile, train fares rise every year, even as reliability falls. Councils across England are on the brink of financial collapse. Birmingham, the UK's second-largest city, recently declared bankruptcy. When even cities can't afford to function, it's not just an economic problem, it's a civilization problem. Public infrastructure tells the same story. Trains delayed. Roads crumbling. Local councils declaring bankruptcy. Since 2010, public investment has fallen to half the level of similar advanced economies. Britain stopped building and started borrowing. Borrowing not just money, but time. Here's the paradox. The UK is still one of the wealthiest countries on earth. So where did the money go? It went into assets, not wages, into property portfolios, not public housing, into offshore accounts, not local businesses. The top 1% now own more wealth than the entire bottom half of the population combined. Meanwhile, over 130,000 children are growing up in temporary accommodation, some living in hotels for months. The official homelessness rate has surged 60% in just 5 years. At the same time, young skilled workers, doctors, engineers, researchers are leaving. Over 500,000 British citizens emigrated in 2023 alone, the highest number in decades. They're not leaving for adventure. They're leaving because they can't see a future here. It's a reversal of history. Once, Britain attracted talent from around the world. Scientists, engineers, innovators who came seeking opportunity. Now, the same talent is leaving for Canada, Germany, or Australia, countries offering better pay, cheaper housing, and functional healthcare systems. In 2024, more Britons under 35 moved abroad than in any year since records began. Even EU nationals who once made Britain their home are quietly returning to Europe. The result? An aging population, shrinking tax base, and rising pressure on public services. A cycle that feeds itself. The brain drain isn't just an economic loss. It's a slow leak of national confidence. What began as globalization became extraction. The system doesn't reward work, it rewards ownership. And when a society stops valuing creation over speculation, it begins to decay from within. Even Brexit, sold as taking back control, only deepened the cracks. Trade barriers hurt small exporters, inflation soared, and foreign investment fell by nearly 30% between 2016 and 2022. Instead of control, the UK got isolation. This isn't just economics, it's psychological. A country that once felt proud, now feels tired, the great in Great Britain turning into a question mark. But here's the part no one likes to admit. The system needs this inequality to survive. Rising house prices keep banks profitable. Cheap labor keeps big business running. And constant scarcity keeps people compliant. Britain's stagnation isn't a glitch. It's the feature that keeps the system stable. Because when people are just struggling enough to stay afloat, they don't have time to ask why they're drowning. Politicians talk about freedom, but what they really mean is flexibility. The freedom for corporations to move capital, not the freedom for citizens to move forward. So let's circle back. The UK, a wealthy nation where living standards are falling. That's not random. It's structural. Wealth exists, but opportunity does not. Civilization doesn't collapse with a bang. It fades quietly when people start accepting decay as normal. Whether you've stayed, left, or are just watching from afar. What's your take on what's happening in the UK? Let's open the discussion in the comments below. Because in the end, history doesn't just happen to us. We build it, or we let it crumble. We let it. Every generation faces a test, not of wealth, but of will. The question isn't whether Britain can recover. It's whether it still believes in rebuilding together. Because decline isn't destiny. It's design. and design can change. If the last century rebuilt from ruins, the next can rebuild from exhaustion. The first step is to stop pretending everything's fine. Only when a nation admits it's broken can it begin to heal. If this opened your eyes to the world, hit subscribe, and I'll help you see the world through time's eyes.